Hi, this is Stephanie with Iron Sharpening Iron. Welcome to a video I'm doing today on the Great Tribulation. This has all been inspired by recent videos I've been doing, things I've been uncovering in the snake cult with Dr. Artis's snake venom theory, and then this World Health Organization proposed treaty amendments that was going on that I talked a lot about in our last video, the snake cult part 4. And also, it is somewhat a continuation of the Beast series. So I will post links for those below. If you haven't watched all those videos, it will give you some good context when going into this video. I'm not going to go into full detail on all those things again, but that is really what inspired this video. After I made the last one with Ken about the World Health Organization, and I was rewatching it and editing, I kept thinking about Revelation 13, and I'm going to get into why in this video. So let's get started. First of all, a short prayer. Father, thank you for bringing me here today. Thank you for everyone who is taking time out of their schedule to watch this video. Father, I pray that you would instill me with your Holy Spirit, that I would help reveal hidden things here that people need to understand, that this would build on their understanding of the scriptures. Father, I pray that you would give us the pieces we need so that we can make it through these end times, Father. I pray that you would bless your people everywhere and bring more and more people to you. In Yahushua's name, amen. Yahushua is Jesus's Hebrew name. If you are not a follower in the Hebrew roots type movement and haven't heard that name before, that's who I'm talking about, okay? Pray to Jesus, okay? So let me just give you a quick outline of this video. We're going to go through Revelation 12 and Revelation 13, talk about the different components there. Then I'm going to go through a possible interpretation for all this stuff, and just keep in mind when it comes to prophecy, and I talked about this in the Beast series, we are trying to understand what's going on, but don't put all your faith in what I say. This stuff could be interpreted to be, or anyone else says. Prophecy is one of the hardest things. I never thought I'd be doing videos on prophecy because it's so frustrating knowing the history, what's currently going on. Is this talking about this time or past time or both? So this is just something I'm seeing right now. Doesn't mean this is God truth. This is the way it's all going to play out, but it's a possible interpretation for this. So I just want to arm you with this and pray that even if it's wrong, at least you're learning the elements to look for, things to look for. So we're also in this video going to talk a little bit about the mark of the beast and the image of the beast, as well as that all plays into this Revelation 12 and 13 here and this Great Tribulation period. So before I get started here, I do want to give a little update on the World Health Organization proposed treaty amendments. If you are not aware, 12 of the 13 got struck down. They did not pass. And the reason, it seems, is that Brazil especially stood up. Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil, stood up and said he was not going to go along with this. And then several other South American, Central American, and African nations stood up and said also that they weren't going to go along with this, at least at this time. They want to review it more or different things. Not that this is totally dead in the water. They are pushing this into their future agenda. They're going to meet again, and they're also going to talk about having this treaty, a new treaty, drawn up, potentially. They're striving by 2024. Now, if it's a new treaty, that's a little bit better maybe for America, because our Congress is supposed to ratify treaties, not just the president. With this treaty amendments that they were doing, because it was based on the old treaty, so they didn't have to get Congress involved to approve it. They just have to vote in the amendments to the treaty that already stands. But if we have a new treaty, then Congress would need to ratify this from a constitutional perspective anyway. Not that that's been followed that much lately, so who knows? And not to say that our Congress is trustworthy either. And, talked a little bit about, certain voting boxes and things being stolen. Who's to say that Congress won't be even more stolen than it is now in the future? So something to keep your mind on, your eyes on, your spirit honed into, praying about this World Health Organization treaty. And we're going to talk more about why today, why this is so important. So, also, in the last video, we talked about the blood moons, and I couldn't find the map, and I think it was just because I was scrolling so fast, of where this blood moon was located. And we talked about a potential interpretation of what it meant that it was located in the scales of justice in the constellation Libra. But I had noticed when I first looked at the map, the moon was really directly over Brazil. And I remember thinking that, wow, it's right over Brazil. And I just saw after the fact that on the same date as the blood moon, on May 15th, is the day that Bolsonaro stood up and said he was not going along with this World Health Organization treaty. So maybe it was really a positive sign that Brazil was not going to go along. They're bringing justice into the world, but are keeping it here to a certain degree, but not allowing this to pass and giving this crazy centralized government control over the entire earth to the World Health Organization. Also, under the blood moon were the other nations that stood up and said, no, not right now. Africa, Central America, Southern America. Now you also had Europe, or Western Europe, and the United States under there, and Canada. But, you know, there are a lot of awake people in those nations as well who weren't putting up with it. And there was a bit of action politically trying to get our government to stop this. But it seems, based on Klaus Schwab's response to this whole thing, that it was in fact Brazil was really the stopping point, the ones that were directly underneath that blood moon. So very interesting turn of events there. So anyhow, let's get going into this discussion. Let's get into Revelation chapter 12. So we are going to be reading through this entire chapter and all of Revelation 13, and also going to be bringing in bits and pieces of Daniel, the book of Daniel as well, because I've mentioned before that whenever you're studying prophecy of the end times, there are two books everyone goes to, the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, and there's good reason for that. So we'll reveal some of that today. So Revelation 12, I'm going to be doing English Standard Version today. The woman and the dragon. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, and one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days, 1,260. So we're going to stop right there and talk about this part so far. So we also, in that last video, in the snake cult, ritual sacrifice, also talked about this sign in the heavens. Ken brought it up, how this occurred at the time that Messiah was born. These stars were lined up. And then it occurred again in 2017 and some other times in history too, from what I read. But it was very interesting. In 2017, Gabriel switched places with Michael. So we'll be getting more into that. So this is talking about the birth of Messiah, right? She's pregnant. This is Israel. She's clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet. She had 12 stars for the 12 tribes. And then she gives birth to this man-child who is going to rule the nations. But her child is caught up to the throne, right? Because Messiah came, but he didn't finish everything he was supposed to do on his first time here. He still has more to do on his second coming. So the woman is going to have to flee to the wilderness, and the time frame on that is 1,260 days. I want to point out right now, if you divide 1,260 days by 30, you get 42 months. 42 months is going to come up several more times today. But Stephanie, how do you get 30 days for a month and get to the 42 number how does that work? I'm following a Gregorian calendar, and some months are 28 days, some are 30 days, 31 days. I'm following a lunar Hebrew supposed calendar that is 29 and a half days. How do you get to 30? Well, if you read the book of Enoch and the book of Jubilees, it actually tells you that a month is 30 days. But how do you get to the 364-day year that it talks about? Well, there are these things that we call intercalary days, interseasonal days, that are markers between every 3 months. You have this extra day in there before you start the next season. So there's these 4 extra days. And in Enoch, it goes into excruciating detail, and Jubilees telling you how you don't count those days while you're counting the year, but you wait until after the year is over, after those first 360 days, then you add those 4 days. So I am thinking, I can't prove this, I could be wrong. I'm thinking that this is actually, if it's a complete 42 months by Zadok Enoch calendar, it's actually 1,274 days. Those other 14 days just aren't tabulated because they are the interseasonal days. And how frustrating would that be if you're a believer and you think, we'll get more into this 42 months. If you're looking for it to be over after 1,260 days and it doesn't happen, maybe that's why the book of Baruch says that he comes back when everyone loses hope, because they say the time is already completed that it talks about in Revelation, that it talks about in Daniel. Why is this beast system still ruling? Well, because there's another 2 weeks maybe to go through of those days that just don't get calculated in. So just a thought there. Didn't intend to get into the calendar in this video, but you just kind of can't help it when you run into numbers like that just perfectly divide into these 30-day month intervals, just like the book of Enoch says the months are divided. Okay, and see, in verse 3, we have a representation of Satan, and a third part of the angels fall with him. And we talked a bit too in the last video, a little bit about the Freemasons and their favorite number being 33. Well, maybe this is one of the scriptures, one of the reasons why they love that number so much, because 33% of the stars fall from heaven and are cast to the earth. They follow Satan instead of Yah. But you know what? Angels are doing better than we are. Yeesh. Okay, let's keep going. And to Satan thrown down to earth in verse 7. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. So remember last time we talked about Michael, and I just mentioned it again, switching places with Gabriel. So this is happening at the same time, around the same time as this woman fleeing into the wilderness. This sign happened back in 2017. But let's keep reading to get a more clarity on where it happens in the timeline compared to the woman fleeing into the wilderness, okay? And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of our Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they love not their lives unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. Now note that it does not give a time frame for how long this battle happens, but you have Michael and his angels are fighting Hasatan, Satan, in heaven, and then he gets thrown down. And then we see Satan's really upset, and he's mad because he knows his time is short. And I don't know about y'all, but I kind of feel like that's what's been going on since 2020 or so. So 2017, you see the sign happen in the heavens. Michael standing up, as we pointed out, occurs in Daniel 12 as well. That fighting begins, I don't know exactly how long after the sign occurred. But like Ken said, it's a marker telling you something's about to happen. Not necessarily right on the mark when it happens, But you get this marker, this happens, and then later we see that some of this other stuff is going to happen. Okay, so maybe this already occurred. He already got thrown down with his angels. Verse 13, and when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished for a time and times and half a time. Okay, guys, let's decipher this. So the dragon is thrown down to the earth. He pursues the woman, but the woman then flies into the wilderness with the wings of an eagle, where she's to be kept for time, times, and half a time, which people always interpret this to be, or maybe not always, interpret that to mean the same as Daniel, that 3.5 years, the 1260 days we saw above. So this is occurring after the dragon gets thrown down, after the fight occurs in the heavens with Michael standing up with his people up there in earth as it is in heaven. Then this verse, the serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with the flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. Okay, I talked about this in part 2, I believe, of the snake cult, about Dr. Artis's theory. I was reading through the scriptures and trying to find, is there anything in the scriptures that points to his theory that snake venom is behind, all this COVID stuff? And with the snake bite shots, I'll refer to them by snake bites rest of this video, the remdesivir, these different portions of the COVID, that it was actually snake venom being placed in the water, in those substances mixed with it. And that's how people were getting so sick. And how crazy it is that you have this scripture here with the serpent pouring water out of their mouth after the woman. But we see the earth opens its mouth, swallows up the water from the dragon, so she's not harmed by this pursuit of the serpent after her. Then the dragon becomes furious, and he went after her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus. Well, if the woman is Israel, God's people, how does she have these other people who are keeping the commandments and have the testimony of Jesus? Shouldn't they be part of the woman as well? Well, it seems from this that not all of God's people are going to be protected in the wilderness during this tribulation period. And if you are a pre-tribber and you think you just get parachuted out of here and you don't have to experience tribulation, I think you should reread your Bible a little more and pray about that, because the saints go through tribulation. That's part of our refinement process. We don't get out of that. But you do have the woman being out in the wilderness, protected from somewhat of what we're going to see going on. So maybe these are people who were really from the seed of Israel directly. They aren't grafted in, or maybe certain ones that make it into the wilderness. And there's all kinds of commentary about what that wilderness is, where it is out there. So you can go check that out for yourself. That's not the purpose of this video. But I want you to realize, even if you're part of those people who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach, you still might be warring with the dragon, not protected in the wilderness. And he, who's this talking about? Messiah, stood on the sand of the sea. What does that represent? Isn't that Abraham? That he said that his descendants will be like the sand of the sea. You see, Messiah now, he's standing with his people, and we're about to watch everything that's about to go on here. So thus far, let me do a little summary. I am wondering if that sign in 2017 that we saw in the heavens signaled the beginning of the war in heaven with Satan. Then we've had all these blood moons and all kinds of crazy stuff in these last few years. Is it possible that in these past few years, the war in heaven concluded, Satan was thrown down to earth with his angels, and we just kind of missed it when it happened? It wasn't obvious. And first, this serpent, Satan, he goes after the woman, God's chosen people, with this toxin in the water. And that doesn't work out. So now he's preparing to go to war with her seed. And I think that's where we're at right now. The water stuff is still going on. It's not finished, but we're getting ready to switch into this other reality of him going to war with her seed. I mean, of course, there's always been a war going on, but things are about to amplify to a new level. Okay? So now let's go to Revelation 13. So this chapter talks about these beasts. So that's what you see the picture in here, the representation. And of course, my first beast video, if you saw it, I talked about that lovely statue out of the UN that looks a little bit like that thing. So anyway, more on that to come. So let's talk about the first beast and read Revelation 13. So the first beast. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea. So Messiah is standing there. He's watching this happen, right? And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, and its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?" So, wow, that's kind of a lot there. Let's go over all that. So again, the sand of the sea. This is Yah's people, I believe. And the sea is another representation of a multitude. These are the peoples, the nations that this other beast is standing on. You have Yah's people with Jesus standing on us. He's our head, right? And then you have these other peoples, everyone else who's not in the book of life, with this other head, this first beast as their head. And notice that this beast has 7 heads, 10 horns, 10 crowns. Verse 2, we start talking about the leopard and the bear. All of this stuff is very reminiscent of Daniel chapter 7. You will see that first you have this lion with the wings, and then you have the bear and the leopard, and all those things are pointed out there. And these can represent the lion with the wings taken off, and then it becomes a man, could represent Babylon. And then next is the Medes and the Persians, and then the Greeks. It's all these empires who have been ruling over the earth, ruling over the Holy Land ever since Babylon. Okay? Talked a bit about this in the beast series. So this new beast has aspects of all of those, but it's worse. It's the beast that you read in Daniel 7:19, the last beast, who is more fierce and terrible than all the ones that came before it. And it's different. It's diverse from the other ones. So it has aspects of these other kingdoms. It will probably reign in the same areas, or actually much more, I believe. And you could also see maybe a modern application of the lion with the eagle's wings torn off. The lion is the UK, maybe the EU kind of generally. The eagle wings being stripped off as America falls. If you've watched my East series, I'm talking about Second Esdras, I believe America has to fall. And that is also what these globalists say, that America has to fall and be restructured to bring in this new world order. And then the bear could represent Russia, of course, right? And the leopard maybe would represent Asia and China. So, as a possibility. And then this dragon that gave the beast its power, that's Satan, right? He's the dragon. And actually, we just talked about in chapter 12, if y'all noticed, that the dragon had these same things with the 7 heads, 10 horns, except that this has 7 crowns in Revelation 12 instead of 10 crowns like in Revelation 13. But if you go back to Daniel 7, you will see that there were 10 horns, and 3 of them get taken out to take it back down to 7. So we're talking all about the same thing here. You see, this first beast, it's an image of Satan himself, because that's what he looked like. Keep going here. Verse 3, we see that one of the heads gets a deadly head wound, and it's healed miraculously. Verse 4, we'll see that you have this worshiping of the beast, or this kingdom, this empire that's reigning. Because a beast is a kingdom or an empire, which I did go into great detail in the beast series. of that. Let's go back to verse 5. And the beast was given a mouth, uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And the authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of the life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword must he be slain. Here is a call for the endurance of faith of the saints. So we see in verse 5 and 6 that he is speaking these great things, this beast is. He's blaspheming, speaking against God Most High, and this continues for how long? 42 months. The same amount of time that woman was in the wilderness? Yes, the same amount of time. If you take that 1260 and divide it by 30, it comes out to 42 months. That time times in half a time. So are we talking about the same time frame? This woman's hiding in the wilderness. Satan's going after Yah's people. And this first beast is reigning. Yeah, I think it's all the same time frame that we are just so close to entering. And some could argue we're already there. And remember that Satan has been thrown down at this point. He's been thrown from heaven. And now he's making war with the saints here. So he could be literally ruling this beast kingdom himself with his fallen angels. And there are people out there that have circulated pictures and whatnot. Are they real? I don't know. That these Anunnaki, these other creatures are already here. More on that later. Okay. Verse 7, we see the war. He wars with the saint. Just as we saw in Revelation 12, after he is unsuccessful at getting to the woman. And this beast is given power over all nations. All. Now, some will say, well, yeah, but it says that about the Greek Empire and the Babylonian Empire and all that. But we're living in a different age then. Back then, they only knew a certain area of the world. And maybe those places really did rule the whole earth. We just don't really know that they had trade routes and different things. We don't really know. But anyway, and we see in verse 8 that everyone worships this beast except the remnant. They are the only ones who do not worship. Verse 10, we see judgment here. If you take people captive, you're going to go captive. If you use the sword, you're going to go be killed by the sword. So that's our patience and endurance, is remembering the judgment is coming for these people who are doing this to us. I believe it's saying here too that we have to be patient because we're going to be the ones being taken captive and being killed by the sword. If you are not a part of that woman that gets to the wilderness, then you're going to be subject to captivity and the sword. So, not the place we want to be. So, let's move on to the second beast. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of the people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast, or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man, and his number is 666. So let's unpack the second beast a bit. Verse 11, we see that there are 2 horns, and horns tend to represent kings, and it is like a lamb, but speaks as a dragon. A lamb to me is representative of Yah's people, right? He is our shepherd, but it speaks like Satan, who's the dragon. So it looks like Yah's people, but its mouth would say otherwise. The serpent's in there, that serpent tongue. verse 12, we see that it exercises all the power of the first beast before him in his presence when he's there. And he causes the earth and people to worship the first beast. And that was the part that I kept thinking about. More on that. Okay, verse 13, he does great wonders and rains fire from the sky as an example of this great wonder. Verse 14, we see that he deceives the earth via the miracles, and he makes people, because of these miracles and deceiving the earth, they make this image to the beast. Verse 15, he gives life to the image of the beast, and those who don't worship will be killed. Who don't worship that beast will be killed. So this brings to mind Daniel chapter 2 and 3. First in Daniel 2, which I talked a lot about in my beast series, the statue of Nebuchadnezzar's dream that Daniel interprets. It represents all these kingdoms, these beasts that we've dealt with over time. That you had Babylon, you had the Medes and the Persians, the Greeks, and then this last beast, this final beast, the fourth beast, as I talked about in Daniel chapter 7 that we had just looked at a little bit. And that it talks about in the book of 2nd Esdras, and it talks about in the book of 2nd Baruch, other two books that you might want to check out. I know they aren't in your 66, but 2nd Esdras is in the 1611 King James Bible. 2nd Baruch is not, but man, I've read and tested that thing, and I don't see that that is anything but scripture, but you go test it for yourself. But anyhow, this fourth beast is mentioned in all those, this beast that is unlike all the other ones. And that is represented in the legs and the feet in Daniel's statue. And then on the very next chapter of Daniel, after this dream, it seems, Nebuchadnezzar thinks it's a good idea to make a golden statue of himself, because he was the head of gold on that statue, right? And make everybody worship and bow down to it, right? An image of the beast, and make everyone worship it. So I see that as a picture of what's going on here. You have the real beast, the kingdom. Then you have the image of the beast, a representation of that through this gold statue, and Nebuchadnezzar being the head of that, the horn on top. And then everyone bowing down and worshiping it, obeying Nebuchadnezzar's commands that, hey, following his dictates that, hey, bow down and worship my statue and worship me like God. Does that mean that's exactly what's going to be going on in this? Well, I don't know. I'd be careful to jump to those kind of conclusions, but it could be. But we'll get more into that. And then verse 16 and 17, we see that this second beast, not the first beast, makes everyone take the mark of the beast in order to buy and sell. And there seems to be three different things. It's a little different in this English Standard Version, but other versions, it's like in the King James, it's like the mark or the name or the number. It's one of the three. All right. So what does it all mean? Talked a little bit about ways we could interpret it, but what does that have to do with today? What does this have to do with that World Health Organization thing you keep talking about? Well, let's look a little bit more at the United Nations that spoke about a bit in the Beast series, and I believe video 1 especially, that America is reigning right now in the 2nd Esdras prophecy. There's 2 heads on that eagle that are left. The British head is already gone. 2 more heads left. America's the one reigning right now. The 3rd head has to take out the 2nd head, America, and then it'll be the final kingdom. It even tells you in the 2nd Esdras that this is what Daniel was talking about. The 4th, the final beast, final kingdom. Okay? It's already here, but the fullness of it is not. There's still that last head, the fullness of the empire reigning and ruling that has not come to fruition yet. So could the United Nations actually be the fullness of the final iteration of that last head on the beast, or part of it? Let's look at this, guys, a little more. Now, as said in that video, I pointed out the League of Nations was reigning during the British Empire, and it's like world government organization. And now, under America, we started with the United Nations. So, we know a beast is kingdom. The United Nations, of yet, is not really a kingdom because of national sovereignty. It's a governing body, but it doesn't have the full authority of your local, state, federal government or however your governmental structure works in your nation. Okay? But this World Health Organization thing could change that. Okay? So if this is the beast, remember it had 10 horns, 10 crowns, and 7 heads. So what could those represent? Well, this is what I think, possibly. The head directs the body, right? Messiah is our head. This beast is the head of the peoples of the nations, the United Nations. We have the G7 organization, which I've spoken about a little bit in the Red Heifer series and other times as well, I believe. And this is the 7 nations that join together to try and change the world, just like the World Economic Forum, some of these other organizations, except these are actual heads of state that get together. Boris Johnson gets out there with Joe Biden and, Macron of France and Trudeau of Canada, etc. And this G7 actually started as G6. The number of the beast, right? Number of man, or at least one of the 6s of the number of the beast. Used to be G6. Well, then Canada joined and it became G7. And then later on, Russia actually joined, but they weren't there for too long. It was G8 for a little bit. And then it went back to G7. And that's where we're at right now, G7. Now, to be clear, the G7 is not an official part of the United Nations, but we see that all the nations in the G7 are a part of the United Nations. And these are the heavy hitters, the ones who are behind really directing, being the head for what the international agenda is in the earth. And it is headed by heads of state, to be your 7 heads. Okay. Also, the United Nations itself has these 6 principal organs that are pictured here. You have the General Assembly, the Security Council, the Economic and Social Council, the Secretariat, the International Court of Justice, and the Trustee Council. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's our second 6. But it also has all these other specialized body over here on the blue, and one of which is the World Health Organization. So could that maybe make up the 7th deal there, and that could be the heads of the United Nations? Maybe. I like the G7 better, though. And then, under this, General Assembly also has 6 divisions. Under subsidiary organs, we see the main committees, the Disarmament Commission. Yes, they want to take away your arms. Second Amendment, the Human Rights Council, International Law Commission, the Joint Inspection Unit, and the standing committees and ad hoc bodies. So there you go. You got 666 with the G6 and the UN principal organs and then the subsidiary organs. Okay, so what about the 10 horns and the 10 crowns? Well, if you go and you look up the United Nations, every nation on the earth is under this thing, except for Palestine and Vatican City, which have their own major issues, right? And they have divided up the world into 10 sections. And of course, it's like anything. There's a president, there's a leader over everything, right? And then a bureaucracy underneath that, a structure of government. So I believe you got your 10 regions of the UN with 10 leaders on top. There are your 10 horns and 10 crowns with your G7 representing your heads. Now, one of these heads is going to be destroyed or was wounded, a deadly head wound. And then it comes back to life and everyone marvels at them. I'm thinking this might be America. Said it's that second eagle head. It's got to fall. But these globalists don't just want to take America down for good. They want to take America down and they want to rebuild it in the image that they want it to be in. This communist one world government. That's what they want. No constitution, no rights. We are going all into captivity under them, or be killed by the sword if you don't want to be captive. And that's the way it's going to be. So I'm wondering if America would be the one that head gets taken out, which you could even argue in another way that already happened when Trump took office. He really was not supposed to be in there, whatever you think of Trump. I know there's debate on that, but I don't think he was really meant to be in there. by their standards, they really didn't want him. They really wanted Hillary. I mean, they had magazines printed showing she won, ready to give out. And the way the media responded to him, I don't worship Trump. He's got a lot of flaws, but I don't really think he was part of their plan. I don't know. I could be wrong. But him getting in there, that took away America from their control, right? As the head. And now they got it back again, right? So maybe that wound has already been healed as a possibility. But it's more likely to me it's probably the real destruction of America. And it's like the phoenix, it burns and it comes out of the fire the way they want it. So another thing I need to talk about when it comes to the United Nations is that the word Gentiles means nations. And if we go to Revelation chapter 11, this is the one that talks about the two witnesses standing up. And you see in this first verse, I was given a reed like a measuring rod and was told, go and measure the temple of God and the altar with its worshippers, but exclude the outer court. Do not measure it because it has been given to the Gentiles, to the nations. They will trample on the holy city for 42 months, and I will appoint my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. Oh my gosh, here those numbers are again. 42 months with the Gentiles, and at the same time frame, this is when the two witnesses stand up. And who's involved? The nations. So could this be talking about the United Nations with the World Health Organization kind of the top of that, ruling and directing it? I definitely think it could be. But let's get back to this United Nations as the beast. Everyone worships this beast except the remnant. What does it mean to worship? I mean, it means like we bow down to it. We obey what it tells us to do. We treat it like God, right? Oh, the United Nations says, take all our guns away. Here are our guns. The United Nations says, if you're a Christian, then you need to stop doing that. You need to worship communism. You need to worship the state. Okay, we'll do that too. And we've seen an image of that playing out in China, and I've talked about that before, that they made it where they won't give you your money handouts, elderly people, if you have crosses and if you worship God. You can't get our income that we're giving you. If you want your God to supply your needs, you better get him to do it, because we're not going to do it unless you worship us. That's what it's about. And if we tell you you have to take a suicide snake bite into your arm to supposedly protect your neighbor, then you better do that too. The United Nations, are they blaspheming Yah and making war with the saints? Well, I think they're blaspheming Yah already in a lot of ways. With, they want to genetically modify the earth. They cry about climate change, and the earth was created for us. It was not created for us to worship it, this Mother Gaia nonsense. And a lot more on that. I spoke a bit about that in the Red Heifer series. But I can definitely see the United Nations already blasphemes Yah, and that they are going to make war with the saints. Maybe they already are, but I don't know if that part is really, it seems like from what we read in Revelation, that part really starts when this last 42 months, this last 1,260 days occur. Now, there are other interpretations of the scriptures applying that to prophetic years, and there's this amazing correlation with the Catholic Church and all these things. And you can go check that stuff out on your own and look at different points of view. But realize the prophecy can have multiple applications as well. So I see that it could be a literal 1,260 day period that we think of. Well, except I threw in that it could be another 2 weeks. Zadok calendar stuff. Throw you some crazy stuff there. But anyway, it's also possible that the woman doesn't actually flee into the wilderness until 14 days after this whole 42-month Great Tribulation period starts, as another possibility. So, but if America's destroyed and the UN headquarters is located in New York City, like you told us in the Beast series, how can it be the UN that's the last reigning beast? Well, of course, the United Nations is not only in New York City, right? The second largest headquarters is actually in Geneva, Switzerland. And I was just realizing yesterday This country is also the location of the World Economic Forum, Davos. The World Health Organization is centered here, and CERN. You know, that place, the particle collider thing that is trying to open up the abyss and let out all the things kept down in the bottomless pit. That thing that's been going for many years now. So, look at Switzerland for the third head. I mean, they got a serious lot of power and control based in that one country. And remember that years ago, if anyone wanted to protect their money, they all put it in Swiss banks, right? So I can see where the United Nations would fit in a lot of ways this first beast that we talked about. So what about this mysterious second beast? This thing that looks like a lamb. And I looked at that word. It is not ram. It is not sheep. It is literally lamb. A little baby, cute little lamb, 2 little horns. It speaks like a dragon. So, I already mentioned this multiple times in this video. Second Esdras, America on that 2-headed eagle. There's two. There's 2 horns on this little lamb. So, could the 2-headed eagle and the 2 horns be related? Well, maybe, but we have seen the heads, seem like they might be different from the horns, but maybe not. And then it's like a sheep. It has the appearance of being Yah's people, God's people. And America is one nation under God, right? Indivisible. And we had all these Puritans come over here. They're running away from religious persecution. We give more money to with all these churches and everything more than any other nation on the earth. So America, in many ways, has the appearance of being God's people, but our leaders are definitely speaking like the dragon, right? So these 2 horns, horns representing rulers, we see that Joe Biden sent the amendments for the World Health Organization Treaty. I wonder, could Israel be the other ruler? America and Israel definitely have the power to bring fire from the sky. We have this advanced technology to make that happen and make us marvel at the beast because of our great military power, right? And this beast makes everyone take the mark. And I've talked a bit about that potentially being the snake bites, which if it is, we see Joe Biden says he wants everyone in the world to take the snake bites. And Israel had the most aggressive snake bite policy in the world. And the leaders of all these pharma companies also happen to be Jewish, or at least they call themselves such, like Albert Bourla of Pfizer and many, many others. So interesting. And we see that this beast has the power of the first beast in its presence. Well, the UN was created in 1945 in the wake of World War II, and the headquarters was finished in 1952 when I believe the 2-headed eagle, or America, started to rule. And Israel was created in 1948, also after the UN was created. So these 2 don't have the power yet until the UN comes into the picture, until that first beast comes on the scene. That's when America really gets its power, when Israel becomes a state. It could also mean that America, this transfer occurs under 2 presidents, two different horns, Joe Biden and somebody else. Or maybe it never happens under Joe Biden. It happens under somebody else that hasn't taken control yet, as it hasn't actually occurred yet. But is that a possibility? Also, I've seen these police tags for their arms for the guys that protect these globalists. And we see the World Economic Forum having this emblem with these 2 rams on it, right? And 1 horn on one horn on the other, those 2 rams. I also wonder about NATO, because they certainly have the power of fire and everything. And they came into the scene later in history. I don't know who the 2 horns on that would be, but could that be the one who's making everyone do all these things? Maybe. But it could also be the EU. I think, though, this America and Israel thing is what's making the most sense to me right now. Israel, obviously, supposed to be God's land, let alone people, right? Appearance of the lamb speaks like a dragon. And look at their presidents, their prime ministers, things they've been saying, things they've been doing. Not very Yah-like what they've been doing to their own people and everyone else around that region. So I think that's definitely a possibility to keep our eyes on. One of the horns could also be represented by the Pope. We see that the Catholic Church wants to give the appearance of being God's people, but it's speaking as a dragon. If you're watching what this Pope has been saying over time, he speaks like a dragon. And he has also been behind the snake bites. And that was actually something that Joe Biden has brought up whenever he's had these press briefings and different things trying to push the snake bites, is that the Pope says it's good and we should do it. So this is really what y'all was showing me. It kept bothering me about the World Health Organization, that the World Health Organization, an arm of the United Nations, is being handed this power, taking away our national sovereignty, that is holding back this first beast from really coming into power. And what's making this happen? The second beast is what's making it happen. They're giving that power and control over there. So mark, number, or name. I mentioned this, that there's 3, right? So what could these different elements mean in all this? So we have this mark. I believe this is a combination. You have the snake bite. You have the record that you took the snake bite. I believe this is going to be tied into a passport, which is exactly what the World Health Organization was about to get as a new power, was to make this standard passport across all nations. And that this is going to be tied into a digital currency or a social credit score system as well, that you are required to have this snake bite in order to buy and sell. It'll be all interrelated together. There has been a lot of speculation whether luciferase exists in the current snake bites, but realize that the technology already exists to have a bioluminescent mark in your body, a physical mark, from taking the snake bites, that they can scan you and see, yes, you in fact took your snake bite. Oh, you're trying to give us a false passport? Sorry, not going to work, because I can scan your skin and see that you didn't actually take it. And an enzyme called luciferase, an enzyme that makes you like Lucifer, into the image of Lucifer, that makes you illuminate, or some mark under your skin illuminate, at least. And we have to mention, too, that Klaus Schwab said that everyone will be microchipped by 2025 or 2026 time frame, which, if you go back to my first fruits video, and I'll try to do a short segment just pulling this piece out, I talked about that's when I'm seeing that maybe America would fall. And that would be the time frame when they really roll out the real full mark. We've had a test run, they're learning a lot, they're tweaking it, and they're going to fully go for it around that time frame, when we will enter this last 3.5 years. And Bill Gates, who I consider another possibility for being the horn, maybe Klaus Schwab too, he has his patent, his 666 patent, to tie this digital currency to your body activity with some kind of implanted chip. So only makes sense that he's invested in the snake bite companies. He makes patent to put the mark in you and to tie that to buying and selling. It's all there, people. They just have to enact it. That's the way I'm seeing the mark. Combination of all these different aspects, all tied together. It's not just one of these elements. It all works in conjunction with each other. And I talked a bit about that mark stuff in the Beast Part 4 and in some of the snake cult videos as well. So, for reference. Then the number 666. If you look at a lot of top company logos, they incorporate 666 in some way. I was just through fellowship yesterday looking at the CERN's logo. And wouldn't you know, there's a 666 there. They got the number. They're counted among Satan's number, right? We want to be counted among Yah's number. Well, some people are counted among Satan's number. They have already given themselves over to him. They don't need to take a mark through their arm so that they are part of this beast system. They're already there. And the name, Satan and his Luciferian minions are here working in his name. As we come in the name of Yahushua the Messiah, they come in the name of Satan. They may not say it out loud because they don't want to draw that kind of attention, but many of the elites of this world, the globalists, the CEOs, etc., they're really Luciferians if you go dig into their deep, dark closets, politicians, etc. That's who they're really here worshiping and serving. So we've seen that many elites, top executives at companies, governmental organizations, the ones that are imposing this system, they're actually exempt from the physical mark, the snake bite, but they have the name or number instead. They're counted among the beast system, and they are all being prepared for Yah's judgment. But for all the normies out there that have not been initiated into the cult, they need to take this physical mark and get these implants and all these things so that they can become part of that beast system. So what does it mean to make an image of the beast? Well, the beast ultimately is Satan, right? That's what we read in Revelation 12. He's the one with the 7 heads and the 10 horns and the 10 crowns and all that. So the United Nations is just an image of Satan. It's already an image. The United Nations and similar organizations are earthly images or representations of Satan. So if the UN is an image of Hasatan, what else could be an image of that? We already mentioned briefly that luciferase actually changes you. I've mentioned that in previous videos. And could that be changing you into the image of Satan, into the image of Hasatan? And this second beast, America and Israel, as we found out that this Cohen guy was the first guy to genetically modify a human cell, that the US and Israel has been doing this for quite some time now, and they are modifying God's image into Satan's image. You know, we were created in the image of the Most High, and when you take something in your body that changes that, who are you in the image of now? I mean, I feel like there's only two choices. You can either be, you know, part of Yah's kingdom or Satan's kingdom. You can be in the image of Yah or you can be in the image of Satan. There's only two choices. And they're not only modifying the image of human beings, but all of God's creation, right? GMOs, you know, modifying mosquitoes, pigs, fish, corn, soy, you know, so many different things. All kinds of things they're genetically modifying. I mean, is that the image? And they're making it, they're giving it life, right? Because this modification is in living beings. It's not just something we drew on paper and thought of. We're not just making an idol out of metal or gold and bowing down to it, but actually a new creation, a new living being in the image of Satan. Is that what it means to give life to the image of the beast? Not only that, people have started to worship having the image of the beast. They have worshiped. Look at my snake bite record. I'm so proud. I'll put it all over social media and everywhere and tell everyone how I took my snake bite. And people have worshiped genetically modified foods and all these other abominations because the second beast has told them to, because America and Israel have, with this fallen technology from these Nephilim, from the fallen angels, teaching them these dark arts. And they have started doing this stuff, and they have brainwashed the people into thinking that it's a good idea. And it's all about worshiping science, or falsely so-called, I would say. Realize that this Revelation 12, Revelation 13 is a lot of symbology here, symbolic speech. So you're trying to decipher the meaning. And it even says, let those who have ears to hear, hear. It's not easy to understand on purpose. Yah doesn't want to give away the whole thing to everyone. And to the enemy, most importantly. It's hidden. You have to search it out yourself and ask the Spirit for direction. Getting back to the United Nations, to worship the beast, to worship the image of the beast, just means to place it in a place of power and authority in your life, to obey its decrees, to place it above the one true God, to look to it to provide for your needs through universal income, for protection from pestilence with snake bites and etc., and protection from foreign invaders with, you know, we have these treaties for peace, but it means you have to give up all your guns in order to do so. America gave life to the image by handing power over for it. And that actually hasn't happened yet. America is in the process of trying to hand over power to this beast. America's ruling, reigning right now, and it's trying to hand over power to this. So if this is true, time is short, because we've talked about this 1,260-day period, if this is a literal period, and this has almost been instituted, time is really short. The World Health Organization has not given up, y'all. They have a plan to make a new treaty by 2024. But before then, they are hoping to enact these amendments. And they are supposed to convene again this year to discuss them and possibly vote them in. So we need to stay vigilant. Once enacted, this could begin the 3.5-year Great Tribulation countdown as national sovereignty is finished and the UN beast is given full power over the nations to commit their blasphemies in the name of global health, including war with the saints. Once they have this power, they can go all out. So what can I do about it? Please pray. Please repent if you have things in your life that could keep you from the kingdom of Yah, because I believe the time is short. I don't know exactly how much longer it will be, but I'm saying things line up right now that could mean very shortly you're out of time. I want you to ask Yah and yourself how you want to live the last few years of your life before meeting your maker. There's things you feel like you should be doing. The time is now. Prayerfully consider political action you can take against this greater agenda, but you need to take care of your spiritual preparation first. And check with him if he wants you to act in that capacity. We should be studying our scriptures daily, not just reading it, studying it, considering it, like what I'm doing here, meditating on his word. I mean, that's how I figure out some of this stuff, put these pieces together. I don't just read Revelation and all the pieces fit. I have to contemplate these things. I have to pray, ask Father for revelation, ask for his Holy Spirit to teach you what his word is teaching, what it's saying, to help you understand it. And if you are a part of this beast, come out of her, my people. You do not want to be caught up with those who have that mark, because later in Revelation it tells you what happens to them. They get thrown in the lake of fire and get burned up. You don't want to be a part of this system. You don't want to worship it. You don't want to keep its dictates. It's going to go to war with us. So, some ways you'll know that this is the final beast. Messiah will come at the end of it. They're going to go to war with us in a really hot way. And we expect 2 witnesses to stand up, whether you think they're literal or it's just the churches standing up. You know, Judah and the 2 houses. That's going to happen. There's a lot more to the scriptures and the prophecy, but I hope you learned something today. I hope this blesses you in some way. If you feel like you've got a piece I'm missing, please put it in the comments below. If you totally agree with me, please put it in the comments below. Like, share this video as you feel led, and also follow us on Telegram and Way to Life Now on Facebook, Way to Life Now on YouTube. But realize, you know, censorship is real on there, so have to be really careful what we say. It's really frustrating to me. So anyway, with that, I will say, Yah bless, Shalom.